My name is Henrietta Owenizie. I'm a full-time faculty here at the Lagos Business School, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Real Estate Outlook Conference. This is being organized by Fine and Country in conjunction with Business Day and Lagos Business School. This conference is meant to help us all understand how the economic trends will impact the real estate industry, and also help us understand how to come up with winning strategies to survive and, why not, even make more success. I wanted to share a few of the benefits that we hope participants will gain from this conference. The first, as I said before, is to understand the impact of the current economic and political climate on the industry, and as a result, discover new opportunities to come up with winning strategies. And subsequently, we also hope that through the panel sessions, we will actually get more insight into the latest trends. During the cocktail breaks and afterwards, also benefit from the networking opportunities and collaboration opportunities with other players in the real estate industry. A few considerations I thought we should keep in mind as we begin to navigate or listen to the various ideas that will be shared. Recently, I heard NDIC share this startling figure, that only 20% of Nigerians have more than 200,000 in their bank accounts, and I was shocked. Because it then begs the question, so how do we take care of 80% of the population? Okay? Real estate is a market where we make money from selling, okay? Buying and selling. So what happens with 80% of the population? We're going to have to think about how we can come up with strategies to still make money from attending to the rest of the population. Another interesting statistic I think we should look at is the age structure of the population for 2018. This is according to the Index Mundi, World Index. We have 42% of the population between 0 to 14 years, and 19% of the population between 15 to 24 years, which means we already have 60% of the population who cannot buy ordinarily. I'm sure there'll be some exceptions, rich kids with a lot of inherited money that can buy. But then that leaves us with, those between 55 and 64 who already have made it usually, but then that's just about 4% of the population. Those 65 years and over who are also just 3% of the population. And both groups give us about 7% of the entire population. So that leaves us with a clear option of the sweet spots, those within the age of 25 to 54 years. So the question is, how do we address this population? Knowing fully well that some of them are still in their first jobs and others are at the peak of their careers. So the question is, how do we take care of all the various challenges that this age group will be faced with? Because at the end of the day, it's that ability to solve problems that gives rise to game-changing, profitable opportunities. So without much ado, let me welcome Mr. Frank Aibogun to talk.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am not an economist. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation to make. I'm a journalist and I enjoy the job that I do, watching people and listening to them. So whatever perspective that I will be presenting this morning on what I see as the outlook for the Nigerian economy in 2018 will essentially be from what I hear and what I see people do. But let me just get into what I have to do, and hopefully I can do it very quickly and yield the podium for more cerebral speakers that you have to listen to. I believe that 2018 will essentially be a year of two halves. I see the second half of the year dominated largely by politics. And so we must hope that we don't all get swarmed by politics when it really gets into gear. But however, I think we all must acknowledge that there is improved business confidence. The sentiments that I hear are positive, and there is significant expectation. On the back of the positive sentiments and improved confidence, CEOs are making decisions around expanding their business or taking new positions. But I also believe that even if politics will dominate in the second half, one good thing about an election year is the fact that there will be improved government spending. So that is a positive in what may later in the year become a negative trend to watch. Now, what is driving the positive sentiments? What's driving the improved business confidence? Is essentially oil production and oil price. Nigeria is almost, or the economy of Nigeria is almost totally dependent on what happens to the oil industry. And so if oil price continues to rally, and there isn't much concern that that will not happen. This time last year, we saw oil price at around $50 a barrel. This morning, as I drove in the car, I checked, it was $67.04 a barrel. That's a significant improvement. I expect that production will remain around 1.7 million barrels a day for the year, which is good. Because if you look back, this time last year, Nigeria was earning something like $800 million from crude oil sale in a month. I believe in December we were probably around $3.6 billion in oil sale. So in 1 year, you're looking at such a quantum leap, and we expect that that trend will continue in 2018. But there is something that most economists agree on Nigeria, and that is about the strong correlation between oil price and the performance of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. You can look at it. Go back as many years as you want to go and look at the performance of the market at every time or every time where the market trends downward. You can certainly predict that oil price is also trending downwards. And so if oil price will remain high, then expect that many more people will make money on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And a significant part of that money, I can assure you, will flow into the real estate sector. We also believe that inflation will continue to trend downward. And with inflation going downward, we see cost of capital or cost of money continue to go downwards as well. Yields from treasury bills are already trending downwards. What's good news about that? It means that the banks will have to find new avenues for their capital. And I expect that that will lead to higher lending to SMEs, higher lending to the real sector. I was with some bank MDs in Davos 2 weeks ago or last week. And the key thing that I heard from them was the desire to begin to turn around the paradigm of their staff, to begin to look at new markets, the easy ways that the banks made money in the years gone by are probably coming to an end. And now they need to do banking as it is done in the rest of the world. And so for your sector, that's good news. There's a young man by the name Kola Masha, who some years ago was technical assistant to the minister or the former minister of agriculture, who's now the president of the ADB. Kola Masha today is the largest maize aggregator in Nigeria, currently working with about 20,000 farmers in Kano, Kaduna, and Katsina. He hopes to take that number to 40,000 farmers by the end of the year and 1 million farmers by 2020. He has no farm, but he sells the largest volume of maize in Nigeria. I don't know where Kola Masha is today. It's probably in New York or in Venezuela or somewhere. And working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he has been able to get capital to acquire for the farmers 20% equity in that business. So Gates Foundation bought equity in that business on behalf of the 20,000 farmers to about tune of about 20%. And what does he do? Provide seedlings, improved seedlings to the farmers, provide education, provide training, and he just waits. When it's time for harvest, he takes the maize and he sells to the big corporations. I don't know about you, but I expect that as investors in the real estate sector, you must be very, very interested in what is happening to power and energy in Nigeria. Now, if you ask me, since the 30th of January last year, I have not used a generator in my house for a second. And so if you are managing property or you are developing property, power is a very key element in the mix. And you ask me, I have a solar system with inverters that carry 6 air conditioners in my house every day, and I do not use a generator. I left an apartment where I was staying until January last year, and my service bill, the last month I got, was 554,000 naira for 1 month. And now I don't have to buy diesel, I don't have noise from a generator. So get ready. In a lot of ways, things are changing in the economy. As I said, if you are negative, there is enough in Nigeria to feed your pessimism. But if you are positive, I say to you, there is also enough to feed your positive aspiration. I hope that you will have a wonderful conference today. But most importantly, I hope that you can open your eyes to see the opportunities that are emerging. Sometimes the impact of improvement in the economy can be lagging in the real estate sector, but surely it will come. And I hope 2018 is a good year for you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the Economic and Real Estate Outlook, being hosted today by Lagos Business School Business Day in collaboration with Fine & Country. My task this morning is to just set the stage with regards to the conversation that we're going to have in a couple of minutes, titled Real Estate, Real Disruption. And, as Mr. Frank Igbogun so positively narrated and also set a very solid stage for our conversation, I really like what he said in particular at the end, where he says that if you're negative, there's a lot to feed your negativity. But if you're positive, there's certainly a lot in the Nigerian economy to feed your positive aspirations. And it's with that that will kick off the conversation this morning to just, have a very brief overview of the Nigerian real estate sector, coming from the point of view of both the residential, the commercial, and also at different levels, whether it's prime real estate or the affordable housing segments, whether it's commercial or residential. I'm just going to go very quickly through some of the areas that we will be highlighting in the course of the day and through the panels that we'll be having a conversation this morning. An active market who are looking for housing, and yet they have other considerations such as affordability, accessibility, flexibility in pricing and in payment terms. Those are some of the things that will drive residential real estate, certainly in the middle to the upper market. But the diaspora market is a big one. It requires creativity. In the retail sector, we like to think of retail from the point of view, and we will go in more in depth when some of our real estate leaders and colleagues present a more in-depth look into those areas. But we do feel that retail needs to be looked at from various communities' points of view. So as we can see now, some of the malls are moving further out to the suburbs, and yet in the city area. So for example, Ikoyi, still talking about prime real estate. In Ikoyi, we really do not have a mall yet. We have the Falomo Shopping Center, which is obviously stalled. But we still don't have a destination mall or a mall of the sort of caliber that we've seen in other locations. But also beyond the prime locations, there is a need for the right retail solutions for individual communities. So some of them will need to be as sophisticated, but all communities require retail, and so retail is clearly a big area that we see growth is going to happen. Another sector that we think is important is the millennial housing sector. We think that the millennial segment is an interesting one. Student housing is also interesting, but just talking a little bit more about the millennials. Now, the millennials are more entrepreneurial, and more of them are staying single much longer. A lot of them are very independent, they're very focused on convenience, and they're also very mobile. So their culture and their way of engaging with real estate is different from, say, the older generation. And they do require housing. Now, real estate developers and investors will need to start thinking of the sorts of solutions that will serve this very important segment. The days of thinking or ignoring that segment, we think, are clearly over, as more and more of them, for example, if you go to Yabacon, which is just one aspect of entrepreneurial pursuits, you have people who started businesses and in a position. If I begin to count the number of young people who contact me, because I'm very active on social media, and I have lots of young people, some say, I have 10 million naira saved, 20 million, 15 million, some even slightly more. Some are able to save 500,000 naira on a monthly basis, or 250 or 150,000 naira. How do we harness their ability to create income and create solutions? And interestingly, this is something we've been talking about for a couple of years now, and we're delighted to see that some investors and developers are actually beginning to target this particular segment of the real estate market. We need to begin to think, just like Dr. Hereta said, how can we provide solutions and use the economy that we have? We're in a growth economy, growth because of our population, growth because of the challenges that we have as an economy, but those challenges essentially present an opportunity. Entrepreneurship is also on the increase. So, do people need housing? Coming back to residential, absolutely. But how do we respond to that? That's the conversation we're going to be having. In what direction we see changes coming, and if there's anything in particular that perhaps your company is doing to embrace the change that we see on the horizon. I would start with you, Kendish.
Thank you. First things first, I'd just like to send greetings from Andre Goudet, our MD. He should have been here today, but was called away at short notice. He sends his He sends his greetings. So unfortunately we have to put up with me, but there we go. I'll just keep this initially brief, so I don't cover items that our fellow panel members want to review. These aren't necessarily my own intuitive thoughts, but what I've gathered a little bit of research over the last few days. It's obviously increasing globalisation. We live in a world and an economy that's forever shrinking. Real estate will be heavily affected by that. Population growth in GDP will all have a global effect. We see increasing urbanisation throughout the world, the movement of peoples to cities, even the creation of new cities in places like the Gulf states and in China. So increasing urbanisation. Sustainability is a bit of a buzzword. It doesn't necessarily have to be an empty phrase. I think that the real effects of sustainability, as we heard from our reporter colleague here, big reductions in running costs are going to have to come through. True sustainable design affects the quality of the environment. And makes these places better to inhabit, to live, to work, to enjoy. And true sustainability will also give buildings and projects a longer life.
Maybe I'll look a bit more local because, like Udo said, we need to look at the impact of real destruction of real estate in Nigeria. I think the first thing we must all agree is that typical real estate mirrors the economy. So whatever happens to the economy, real estate is a microcosm of the economy itself. So we've been in recession now for about 2.5 years, and obviously that's had very, very significant impact on the segment. The other issue, I always like to look at the value chain, look at the participants along the chain, and how the destruction has affected each of those participants. Then look at it from the angle of policy. You recall that the real problem started sometime in 2015 because I always stress that real estate is a financing game. A lot of people see real estate as the brick and the mortar. Ultimately, whether or not you succeed in this business is a function of your financial model. If you are unable to match your assets and liabilities optimally in the medium to long term, we are dead. And we'll see that that's what has happened. Now, so in 2015, everybody was cruising. Up to 2014, we were all cruising. We were all doing our thing. We were building retail centers. We were building shopping malls. We were signing dollar leases. We were signing as high as $100 per square meter per annum. And everything was just happening. People were just taking on obligations. We were taking offshore facilities to finance all those developments. And then the year started with CBN. You recall that in a matter of 8 months, CBN issued like 18-20 various policies around forex, and the market basically scattered. So you had a situation where you had entered regulations. The fundamental assumption was $1 to 170, 190, and then you sleep one day, you wake up the following morning, and you saw dollar going to 200, 250, 300, 400, 480. And there was nothing to do about it. So you can just imagine the impact of that on the entire segment. Now, we also must understand that the segment in Nigeria is largely import dependent. Once you take land and you take cement, practically every other thing that you use, people will tell me that there are manufacturers of finished items today. I know that, but that's just satisfy less than 2% of the market. So the land development is still depend on import. Now, just take a simple situation where you have entered obligations again. For example, as a developer, you fix the prices based on particular exchange rate, and this happened. So this to me is a fundamental element of the destruction. And of course, at the other end, because financing is both retail, which Udo has mentioned, and also the construction finance. We have also entered into obligations with banks. The first problem in this country is that long-term capital is not readily available. When it's available, it's very expensive. Interest rate range from 18 to 25%. I always say, I really don't know how you have to be selling cocaine in those buildings. If you borrow at 25%, you will pay off, you will sell in this same market, and you also pay off all your obligations. So that's what has happened. You know, at the retail segment, we saw that a lot of retailers, we have to be fair to everybody. We built a mall, and by the time we were launching, it was 100% occupancy, you know, and then this discussion started. Now guys could not import, they had their open letters of credit, there was so much confusion, you know, so people started easing out. And then those who could import, they couldn't sell. When these things happen, you have to manage to keep your head above the water, navigate through the change, because like I always say, it is those whose heads are above the water at the end of the problem.
I would like to just ask you to perhaps contribute to the concept of the millennial housing. Is that something that UBDC as an organization is looking at? Is there any way in which you're adapting some of your offerings to target this millennial segment? And do you have any specific initiatives to make it actually, as it were, accessible for them?
Okay, well, I'm not sure whether my title will be millennial housing, you see, but obviously this market has changed significantly over the past 5 to 7 years. All of us, I believe most of us recognize that fact. Before, UBDC, we played only in the luxury segment. As the market was changing, we moved to what we call the premium segment. Then we moved to classic. Now we're moving to comfort homes. The challenge, first of all, is that I think our concept of housing and accommodation in Nigeria is a bit problematic. And I'll give you a very simple example. I'm sure many of us remember that when you first started to visit your uncle and whoever in England, you stayed in their houses, you noticed that there was only one toilet and bathroom in the whole house. Maybe there was one guest toilet and then one toilet upstairs. If you wanted to use the bathroom, you had to go upstairs. You know, very simple. The cost of M&E is very expensive. But here in Nigeria, the fresh graduate out of school wants a 3-bedroom apartment, all rooms on suite, toilet and this and that, you know. That will not work because M&E costs could be as high as 20 to 25% on the cost of your product at the end of the day, you know. So over the past few years, we've had to tweak our designs. We've had to standardize quite a number of things. We're launching comfort homes. I don't want to advertise there. We're launching comfort homes in Q2 of this year. You know, that's targeted at those in the range of 25 to 60 million category.
What location?
It's the site. One is not even as far as the Lagos Business School. One is just before Lagos Business School. Yeah. You know. So the challenge is that, you know, the constituent elements of the cost of the building. You know, I hear you, man. You know, in Europe they charge monthly rent, which by the way is also happening in Nigeria because everybody's been forced in retail now. They charge quarterly rent. I wish it's still possible to collect yearly and 2 years rent in advance, but the market is forcing all of us to do differently. But if we also understand that the Nigerian developer does not borrow at 2 or 3%, Nigeria will borrow at 80-20%. And if you borrow at 80-20%, how long do you have to wait to repay? You are dead if you don't quickly bring in cash. That's the challenge. That's the difference between me as a developer here and as a developer in Europe.
We're not quite at millennial housing yet, but L. Allen has looked always at the long term, 30-35 years activity here, and it's an integrated property construction and maintenance group. Not trying to sell it, but that's the approach that's been taken over the time to try and take out risk in the process, basically by either doing it or managing it yourself. El Alan's traditionally done quite a bit of real estate, property development, usually high-end for oil companies or for the luxury market. So probably playing it a little bit safe, but we have recognised the change in the market, the change in the environment here in Nigeria, the growing middle class, where the changes are going to come from. So we've recently embarked on a new scheme for us. As I say, it's not millennial, but it's mid-range. So going after that, I suppose it still is an upper middle class market, but certainly not luxury. We think that is one of the main areas for growth in Lagos and in this country. That's brought about a few changes, should we say, to the product. We've taken a few clues from Europe and the States, and it's been mentioned here already. But space standards, we've reduced the size of the apartments, the kitchens, the bathrooms. All have been brought down for affordability reasons. Again, we've touched on it in terms of sustainability. We're looking to generate electricity on the site itself to lower costs. It's almost a gated community, as you mentioned earlier. So it's a mixed use. So there's retail, leisure, entertainment, food and drink, work, a residence park. So it's all there in one location. It's on the Lekki access just past Oniru. So that's where we're starting to put a lot of our focus and effort and investment. And we see that's where a large part of the future is.
Let me just take you very quickly to something that was referred to earlier, even though we're still coming to the financing. When she talked about properties that are essentially empty, or properties that people have grown out of, so the mansions, the villas in your Ikoyi axis, Lekki, and all of that. You also have in some of those locations tall buildings that have been standing there, some of them largely vacant. One that actually comes to mind is the Federal Secretariat, which we know is problematic. We know there have been some government issues around that. But I'd like to get some of your thoughts around those types of projects. So, for example, if I said to you UPDC, if I gave you the Federal Secretariat, what would you do with it?
We bought 1004 at the same time when Federal Secretariat was sold to another developer. And there were very difficult challenges which we were able to overcome. Like I said, our philosophy always in our company is that when those problems come, we just find a way of solving the problems legitimately and move on. Issue with Federal Secretariat 1004 was that Federal Government sold 1004 and Federal Secretariat and a lot of other assets to developers. And Lagos State jumped into the party, and Lagos State asked for ratification fees. We took a sound business decision that we're losing so much interest on a monthly basis. If we keep this asset in 2 years, what we'll have paid will have covered the interest. Meanwhile, we'll have completed this project, we'll have satisfied our customers. I mean, at that time, 1004 was already 70% sold. So we did ratification with Lagos State and went ahead, finished 1004, and we moved on. Unfortunately, Federal Secretariat is enmeshed in a much more complex legal quagmire now, because sequel to that, there is now a Lagos State mega city law. The summary of which is that if the property has been designated, if the user of the property is public, you need some sort of instrument before you can convert it into something along that line. which is the major problem, and so we really need to solve that problem, but if the property is handed over to us, I think what the developer was trying to do was the right thing, redesign into small apartments, sell some, build a lifestyle, create a lifestyle development out of it, and just basically sell it to those who are interested. On the other hand, clearly, as you know that we have also taken some tests in terms of regeneration. One of the things that we have done with Festac, and I encourage you guys to go to Festac. When we bought the Dover Hotel, we made Golden Tulip out of it. The second complex, we have converted into 185 apartments, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, which we've sold 80-90% now. And then we built a shopping mall, festival mall on site. The idea was to create a small regenerated environment. And by the way, we have our own power on site. We have our own 5 megawatt IPP on site, so we're not dependent on the national grid. Today we're using less than 3 megawatt anyway, but the installed capacity is 5 megawatt. So, and I also know that Lagos State is doing. They have some major programs around regeneration. There's LASURA, Lagos Urban Renewal Agency. They have a number of properties in the market. We bidded for some, and I'm sure some of those will also come through in the meantime. And by the way, we do a lot of joint ventures. As a matter of fact, most of my projects along this axis are by way of joint ventures. Napier Homes was a JV, my James Pinnock was a JV, Rome Gardens was JV, so over the years also we recognize the need that you need to bring parties to the table and align their respective strengths. Somebody has land, he doesn't have money, somebody has money, he doesn't have project management expertise. As a developer, you're an aggregator. So what you do, you bring everybody together and you try to unlock value in the asset. I have 2 or 3 JVs going on now in Abuja. And Pinnacle is a JV. Pinnacle in Abuja is also a JV.
Looking at real estate in Nigeria, it seems like real estate is targeted for people in the upper class. Because, when there's a development going on and you hear some of the prices that the developers score or the owners score, it's mind-blowing. And I get asked myself, would young people like us ever own anything? Aside from maybe our parents who are well-to-do, and I don't know how they live, or I ask, is it ever possible for us to own anything? Looking at all of these disruptive measures, we're talking about in real estate. Where does looking at mortgages, I know I've lived in the United Kingdom for a while, and I found that it's actually cheaper getting a mortgage and paying rent in the UK. Like, you speak to people and you tell them your parents and they look at you like you're bonkers, something is wrong with you. So what's the place of mortgage, here in Nigeria? Because the mortgage system here, it's terrible. The interest rates and all of that. And even if you're going to get a mortgage, if you're not a doctor or if you're not in a professional, you don't belong to a professional body or in a professional field, you probably wouldn't get considered for a mortgage.
Mine wasn't so much, I don't actually have questions. Mine was just to answer a couple of issues. We are where we are with rentals for historical reasons. Actually have to do with people not paying and the law of the land being such that the landlords didn't have redress against tenants that didn't pay. That's where we started moving from the monthly rentals to the yearly, to the 5 yearly, to where you pay the rent with the end of the lease. So it has to do with mindset. I'm an architect by training. You cannot convince a Nigerian to build their house out of mud. Do you want to take them back to the village? So Adobe housing, which was all the rage in the 80s and the 70s, in places like South America, you cannot sell to the Nigerian. I went to school in the University of Jos, and you cannot build a brick in Jos, where brick is the main thing. So it has to do with mindset. A lot of what happens has to do with mindset. You talk about joint ventures, and I know UPDC does a lot. You cannot convince the average owner of a piece of land that his land is not worth as much as he thinks it is, and therefore the return on his investment is not as much as he thinks it ought to be. And I know I speak for a number of valuers who do not get paid their valuation fee because the owner of the valuation does not like the value you have placed on his property. So it has to do with Nigerian mindset. You asked the question about talking to the policymakers. A lot of these conferences are so that we come up with white papers so that we pass them to the policymakers. They are not interested. I can tell you that as a matter of fact. So for example, Hakeem talks about the change in the Land Use Act. Land Use Act is a Lagos thing. It started in Lagos in 207, now 2017, they've changed it. And why have they changed it? They want to get more tax. Have they stopped to think about what is actually happening in the environment? We're going to reach a point where none of us can afford to work here, let alone pay tax. So that what the gentleman is talking about creating an enabling environment, and a number of people are talking about creating an enabling environment, the act of government is to actually create an enabling environment so that we can work our 9 to 5 and make a measure of profit and therefore pay taxes. But we have a banking system that does not allow for long-term slow money, like REITs and stuff. So we can't get mortgages to pay monthly. So we actually have a series of problems. So I don't really have questions. I just wanted to comment on all these things. And maybe the disruptors we're talking about is actually disrupting the mindset of our politicians to be able to create policies and enshrine in those policies longevity, so that we can know that when a policy comes into play, it's for the next 20 years, and we can therefore make investments on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Millennial. Truth of the matter is that when I first started work, I used to think like you. I used to think that, will I ever own a house? So it's not surprising that you're thinking like that. I think it's a function of, we have to understand that there's what we call property ladder. You have to know where you want to start from, and then you grow into. If I use myself as an example, I built my first house in Igbogo. I'm sure most of you don't know Igbogo. I built my first house in Igbogo, in Igbo Road. And I was very proud of the house, very, very proud. And I moved from Igbogo. When I'm from Igbogo to Bagada, because I moved to, but today I live in Igbogo to the glory of God. So as a millennial, you have to also, because we also have to be very, very realistic. When I drive through Igbo Atlantic, I just say to God be the glory. The reality is that the market has forced a lot of things on us. Part of it is to look beyond what we ordinarily would do, to begin to think and live outside the box, to begin to create products which can reasonably meet the expectations and pockets, because your pocket must also match your ambition. So you're talking of your expectation and your pocket. And a lot of things are happening even in the mortgage finance space. NMRC, the mortgage warehouse company was launched recently, and I know that MBAN and NMRC, they're doing a lot, to make mortgage a lot more accessible and affordable to people. But NMRC does not offer. NMRC is a liquidity creating institution for primary mortgage institutions. But the PMIs are doing quite a number of, so I think also if we ask questions, you'll see that quite a number of things are happening in that space. In terms of commoditizing, I've been saying two things. First is that we have to start, wait for this, manufacturing houses. We have to industrialize the process. Today, we still build, we still go and talk about Sharafa and about Toyi. That will not meet the housing shortage. That will not meet the need of housing shortage in the country. So we have to find a way of industrialize that process. We have to bring significant scale. All of us in this industry, we don't do 100,000 houses per annum. Bring everybody together. Everybody. We don't do 100,000 houses per annum. And we're saying we have shortage of 16, 17, 18 million. When do you want to meet that shortage? So we have to industrialize that process so that we can bring scale. And what I mean by commoditizing housing is that we have to create a framework that will ensure that you can easily trade your house. So you can move, you can buy and sell house within a minimum period.
Okay, so just very quickly, I smile when people frown at the idea of the monthly or weekly rents or things that I say to do with materials, because it reminds me of what happened in the banking industry when Mohammed Yunus talked about microfinance. People said, look, the bank is for people who have money, not for the poor. And today, microfinance, especially internationally, has proven to be more profitable than the typical traditional banks. And so my point is this: I'm not even talking just without a concept, without an example in mind. I recently had a participant who dared to do this thing I'm talking about, and I think his turnover is about 7 million annually. In other words, he's making actually more money than those who are collecting annual rents. The challenges you all mentioned are real, but then there's strategic ways to go about it. I'll just give one short example. If you recall in the 90s when Tokunbo cars became the vogue because Nigerians couldn't afford brand new cars, Honda did something that was really creative. And as a result, were able to sell a lot of cars, brand new cars. They went to organizations and tied up deals with them. I know some banks that were tying car ownership to employment. And so Honda sold a lot of cars through these organizations, and they were guaranteed of the returns because they were collecting the money at source monthly. So it was a deal with the organization, not just individuals. And that's the way microfinance works. There's that proliferation of poverty. They're also doing fantastically profitably, more profitably than most commercial banks or the microfinance banks, because they also have found a way to ensure returns. So the challenges you've all mentioned are real. Nobody's doubting that. But the truth is, there are creative ways to guarantee that. So my summary of my contribution is, don't be deterred by challenges. Think through it. There are winning strategies. There are ways to go through. And people are already building with mud, and they're building strong houses, not just in Latin America or here, but in Europe and in the US.
Now we're going into our second panel for the day, which is the panel for creativity in bridging the finance gap. Creativity in bridging the finance gap.
I want to call on you to start off this discussion, to lay the foundations. One thing is very clear: financing is one of the major challenges in real estate, whether it's to do with affordability of those who want to buy, or even building for the developers. So please give us your take on this.
I think the starting point of talking about creativity in financing from a funder's perspective, perhaps starts from thinking about the creativity in the revenue generation potential or model for any sort of real estate project. Obviously, if you are building to sell, the type of financing you need is quite different from if your objective is to lease out a property for collections over a period of time. As was sort of highlighted in the other panel, our environment hitherto has not created a lot of room or a lot of opportunities to support long-term financing. And believe it or not, it was worse before. If you think about it, a number of the commercial developments that we see around town now, whether it's commercial offices or retail spaces or retail malls or industrial parks and the likes, what gave birth to them was the evolution of newer types of financing that were sort of longer tenor than what was historical. So either what you could find was, you could only find projects that could be supported by short-term financing. So I'm building residential properties and I'm going to sell them. So ultimately, the starting point is trying to get creative about how revenues are collected. If I take the retail space, for example, and Mr. Green will probably have some things to say about this. The last 2 years shock therapy that we've all received in the economy has brought us all to our come to Jesus moment about how we look at rents and what quantum of rent we can charge and what is sustainable and what sort of makes sense for the market. Dollar rentals, was a norm within the commercial financing structure, but that assumption was challenged when there was a shock and a sudden devaluation, and the reaction of the regulatory entities was sort of different from how most operators in the market would have looked at it. But what that also did was it created opportunities for people to get creative, for lack of a better word, about how rentals are charged. So people started exploring rents that are sort of either Naira denominated but with escalations in Naira, or dollar denominated but with fixing the rate of the dollar. Ultimately, what it was about was creating a situation of survival between the tenant and the landlord. It has to be a symbiotic relationship. That the reality is that both entities are required for survival. So you need to create a sustainable environment that allows for understanding the challenges of the buyer of the property, as well as for the person creating the property. The developer's challenge is finding long-term financing. The buyer's challenge as well is finding long-term financing, either from the financial institution or from other alternative sources. One thing for sure, maybe to sort of cap up my introduction, is that there is a need for longer sources of capital within our financing structures, whether that's coming from pension funds, whether that's coming from insurance businesses, whether that is coming from a larger quantum of equity, or from principal capital from family wealth, from family wealth houses that have a lot of wealth but they can deploy it into other sources. All of that sort of capital is required to intervene in the real estate space, and that's part of what brings the creativity to it.
In our current environment, we appreciate that local funding from the banks is very expensive. High rates of interest, somewhere in the region of about 25% before additional fees. In speaking to our developers, we know that they say in taking funding from the banks, you're actually working for the bank. Again, they have a different view on that. So we also, in talking with a lot of our developers, we also know that is a reason why in our local market JVs are so important, because as Mr. Goinron also said earlier when he spoke, the landowner may hold the land, the developer will have the capacity to know the market, and working together they can deliver the product. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of developers, when they partner with the landowner, they don't have the capital, and you need capital. The developer needs to inject capital into the project. The capital doesn't come from the landowner. He's probably not going to put in a penny, because you need capital, because the person who is going to come and put in additional funding is going to tell the developer, if things become difficult, you have not put in a penny, you can just get up and walk away and you leave us with the project. So they insist that the developer puts in money. So these are the primary requirements. The land, the JV, another very important one is pre-sales. Pre-sales, first of all, they help fund the project. Second of all, they show that the project is bankable, that there are actually parties that are really willing to buy into the project. You're not just putting a project out there and it's not focusing on the market.
So as you were speaking, what occurred to me was, could there be creativity from the supply side? So for instance, because at the end of the day, people stop taking loans because they're too expensive. Then the banks have to start thinking about what to do, because they only make money from being able to give out loans. So what if, instead of charging 25%, the bank were to say, I'll charge 10%, but then you give me 2 houses? which will give you additional income. So I think it's really time for us to begin to think out of the box and offer different things, because at the end of the day, the bank also needs you to take their money. And if you all don't take the money, okay, what happens to them? So I can see the itching to respond to that. Okay. Abi, can we just take the last panelist and then you can come up with your response? So Mr. Hakeem, back to you again.
We're looking at finance, talking about financing, and I always like to speak from our experience at UPDC. Basically, like I said earlier, financing, the financing problem, you have to look at from two angles. You have to look, first of all, at the construction finance. So you can go to UBA and get UBA to give you a guarantee that people will give you 200,000 naira per month, but you still have to build the house. So you need money to build the house. Because without building the house, the monthly repayment, there will be no platform for the monthly repayment. And we have always taken the view that you have to find a way, even within all the constraints in this environment, to try to raise long-term wholesale capital. So you will have noticed that we've been fairly active in the markets. In 2010, we did a 15 billion naira bond, which we finished paying in 2015. In 2012, we floated the REITs, the 26 billion naira REITs. In 2015, we had to do a CP to do some bridge financing. And now I'm in the market. I just got a second approval to do a 20 billion naira bond, which is going to open in another 1 or 2 weeks also. Because again, we have spent the past one and a half years again also to look at our portfolio. We have rejigged the portfolio. The pipeline is now more in line with what the economy now demands. So this funding of 20 billion naira bond will come in at the right time. So that's on the construction side. You have to always find a way of creating long-term funding, such that even if you take bank finance, you have creative ways of taking out that finance by spreading your financing over a broad-based set of subscribers, which the bond gives you the opportunity to do. But it doesn't stop there. The other issue in creative financing is that you also have to look at the cost of your financing, even beyond the finance cost. So for example, you're doing a project, you have to look at the cost of perfection of your transaction. And you have to think through from the beginning as to how you want to ensure that you minimize the transaction cost, because it can be heavy, it can be high as 18% of the capital value of your project. And that is just crazy anywhere in the world, So the challenge is that from the beginning you have to think through how you structure your transactions. I did a simple calculation that if you take the minimum wage in this country, and you take a 6 million facility, it will take 52 years to repay the capital value of the facility. So when the interest rate is that high, it doesn't make sense to take a mortgage if it's 20%, maybe 25%, But what people do in this climb is that you take the mortgage and you find ways, you borrow money from your brother, you use your holiday allowance, you make sure that within 2 to 3 years you pay. That is the only reason to make sense for you. But like I said, there are a lot of things happening in the mortgage space also. NMRC came on board. NMRC is supposed to be a liquidity creating vehicle. They're supposed to refinance mortgages created by primary mortgage institutions. But like I said at that time, that NMRC will refinance mortgages. It means that the mortgages have to be originated. To originate mortgages, the assets have to be created. So you go back to the beginning of the value chain. So when we begin to think like this, we can then understand the problems. I think the first point that I like to make is that we're talking about the problem because the problems are there. And you guys must understand that I sit on a business that, in spite of all these challenges, we're still making effort to at least deliver in the marketplace. And I understand, when Dr. Reta said She was the only academic on this panel. I wish you knew that I also used to be a teacher. I used to teach law at the University of Lagos. And incidentally, I remember when we had the second national workshop on the Land Use Act in 1991, I was one of the speakers. Most of the issues that we raised in 1991 around consent, around perfection, around registration, around unearned increment theory are still the same issues that we are grappling with today. So those problems are there, you know. It's about the difference between many people and us is that, between me, for example, and Professor Nubi, is that I talk about the problems I live here, I go back to my office. I find creative ways of dealing with the problem.
I just wanted to harp on what Hakeem was saying. Perhaps the takeaway from this entire engagement is looking at efforts of improving our pressure application to the governments or on policy making. But the only thing to note is that you can't have it's difficult to have one institution or one entity being responsible for all of that. Redan, if you take an example, is more focused on housing. But there are other challenges. There's challenges on REITs, there's challenges on commercial real estate. And different entities probably need to be organized to create that pressure group. In some areas they will converge, in other areas there will be different focuses. Aki was talking about what Stanbic has been doing with regards to REITs in Nigeria. 7 years, more than 7 years we've been working on it. And we just picked an area where we thought it would have a material impact on the economy or on the sector. And over the years, you're chipping at it, but you've moved from the position where the FIRS is telling you that it can't be done to the position where they're the ones actually finding the appropriate regulations within the current laws on how it can be done. But that only happens with engagement. If there's a broad sword approach to trying to apply the pressure group, or rather the pressure, it would be the achievements would be sort of very limited. So perhaps the focus is to try to find smaller segments for the different entities, or maybe form different sub-entities within either Redan or other professional bodies to push through some of the key changes that are needed within our policy environment.
My final note is that we all know it's a challenging market. As I had said earlier, as a developer, you need to be focused on your game. You need to make sure your costs are low. To specialize. I talk to developers. Some of them are focusing on, for example, housing that has already been built. For example, in Ikoyi, where you just remodel an existing structure and add to it rather than knocking it down, because the risks are lower. It's easier to turn around the project quicker and to finish up and sell. So it's about being creative. I can't talk about individual instances. For everybody here, they know what it means to be creative, to lower your costs, and to look at the partnerships, the JVs that can give you the good return so that you can get out quickly and go on to the next one.
The person who is able to come up with a solution that helps more people stands the chance of making the most profit in a more sustainable way. I frequently remind people that the reason why Bill Gates is the wealthiest man in the world, Amazon is now ahead of them, even Amazon also, was because they focused on providing a solution that was globally relevant, So that smart kid that decides, this is the problem, why don't I develop an app where people who own land but can't build can say, I have land, and say the location, and those who can build but can't own land can also say, I can build, I'm looking for land, and therefore connect people, landowners with developers, and also off-takers, who can pay less if they pay off-plan. So in a sense, somehow, again, the power is in the hands of your creatives. Can you then take power from the banks and say to them, if you don't give us a good rate, you can find other creative ways to finance our operations, and then come up with buildings that, developments that, are more affordable and allow more people to be able to own homes or properties for whatever their businesses are. So creativity, break industry orthodoxy.
We're going right next into the next agenda, which is the presentation. I will be sharing with you our thoughts about the prime real estate market this year, and all of that will be in about 5-7 minutes, and then we'll go right on to the final panel for the day. Okay, so yes, so there has been a lot of high optimism about the real estate market this year. The market started at the back of very great expectations, and those expectations and predictions actually are coming at the back of strong indications that things are really going to be different this year. So it's something to note for, and it's something that we're very watchful about as things unfold. We've gone through the first month of the year, and I just wanted to just read out some of these indicators pointing to the economy and also how it affects the real estate industry. So, for the economy, we've seen the progression. In 2016, we are deep in economic recession. In June last year, we were announced officially out. And this year, we're on the recovery path. In production of crude oil, which is actually our mainstay, we have very good numbers for this year already. Last year ended at a high. We had 1.6 million barrels per day, and we also have numbers higher than that today. Crude oil prices last year averaged between 2016 averaged between $40 to $42 per barrel. Last year averaged $50 to $52 per barrel. This year, starting with the very first month, we've already seen a $70 mark. That is really very encouraging. Forex challenges, we know what it was in 2016, we know what it is today. And we also see movements, we actually expect to see movements around that particular indicator as well. Government policies. In 2016, there was a lot of delay with fiscal policy, and there was lack of clarity on the part of the government. Last year, we saw some more, better, more effective fiscal policy and better clarity from government. This year, we only expect better policies as we gear up for the elections. Inflation rate. In 2016, we had an all-time high of 18.22%. Last year, we saw it drop to 12.21 at some point. This year, we expect more movement as we also move down the year. GDP is expected to grow. Market capitalization of the stock market is already growing. We saw 16.80%. And then now, coming to the real estate market, what are the things we foresee for 2018? I just want to share some of our thoughts on what we see happening in the market and where we see the market going. So we're going to see sustained rise in supply of prime commercial real estate. We expect about over 50,000 square meters of new prime office spaces to be introduced. We also expect to see more retail. In the past 5 years, I wanted to point out that the market has seen over 120,000 square meters of prime spaces being introduced into the market. And that is actually very commendable. This list just breezes through some of the buildings that we have currently in the market and how we came about some of the numbers that just mentioned right now. Okay, so with the increase in supply, we expect that prices will continue to drop and eventually begin to stabilize. And this table shows you a narrative of price movements through the year, starting from 2015 2016, 2017, and then this year, where we are this year. So if you look at 2015, you saw that we were at some point between the $900 to $1,200 mark, asking rentals. And today we hear asking rentals of as low as $500 per square meter. We also look forward to seeing corporate organizations, corporate tenants migrating to newly built offices, generally in search of better services. And then older buildings will be left vacant because when someone moves, there will be a vacancy. And then the landlords will either sell those older buildings as it is, or renovate and then lease it for significantly lower than historic rents. So we expect to see more cuts in rental figures. The first 3 quarters of the year is expected to be quite encouraging. So, good, better, and best. And some part of the year, the Q4, we expect to see some slowdown in commercial activities as the flow of foreign capital halts. And this is majorly because most companies will be taking strategic decisions on how to position themselves post-election. They will be thinking, should I consolidate or should we just slow down and then wait and see where the market is going? We also expect to see rise in co-work spaces for corporates and SMEs, which is already a very big trend we're seeing now. We also expect to see more technological solutions being used to improve real estate operations. So whether it's property search, leasing, facility management services, and of course smart building technologies. So today we have a number of buildings with smart technologies instilled and included in them. Talking a little bit about the residential markets. We see a number of opportunities in the residential market space. Initially, back in the years, what was considered as challenges many years ago today are clearly opportunities in the market. Speaking of opportunities, let's talk a little bit about occupancy levels. Some years back, even currently, we still have high vacancy occupancy levels, low occupancy levels and high vacancies in some of the high-rise luxury buildings we have in Ikoyi, Victoria Island. But there's been some creativity back of that. We now see more of some of those buildings being used for short-let apartments, which provides flexible accommodation for people in dire need of those services. Also, moving on to Lekki axis, in Lekki Phase 1, we used to see most of the vacant semi-detached houses and fully detached houses that were empty, looking for tenants. We're now seeing them being converted to one-bedroom apartments and studios, and this is actually providing the much-needed accommodation for young working-class singles who need to live close to work. Some are also being converted to retail outlets, so we're seeing those movements across those markets. And also, stakeholders are finding creative ways to tackle the issue of financing because, like all the panels have said today, finance is a major challenge to progress in the real estate market. So we're seeing joint ventures, we're seeing collective investment schemes, such as the Final World Club. We're also seeing off-plan sales, pre-sales, like some of the panelists articulated. On the purchaser side, we're seeing very flexible payment plan. So some vendors are willing to do as much as 36 months payment plan for new projects. We're also seeing instrumental payments being applied in the case of completed projects. We're also seeing rent to own, which is more like a very interesting topic that had come up in the past few years. Developers are also looking to accept quarterly rental payments and all of that. Then going to the other market trends we see an increased demand for good value 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, especially in the Ikoyi precincts. selling within the range of 120 to 150 million naira. There's a market for that and a quite significant market for that. We also see increased demand for terraces, semi and fully detached houses, still within the same location. And then, three major things that you always have to bear in mind in those properties and those value properties. What makes those properties valuable is the location, the price, and the space. Those three major mix have to be gotten accurately before you can actually say this is a very good product. And then when we speak to the space, we also refer to the quality of build and of course the features that it has to offer. We also see increased demand in 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in the Lekki precincts. And then generally, we see a more vibrant residential market, which will be coming at the back of an improved economy. I'd like to just round it up with a quote to say, real estate cannot be stolen, neither can it be carried away. Purchase with common sense, paid in full, and managed with reasonable care. It's about the safest investment that one can make. The subject today, we're looking at the trends. We're looking at the opportunities in the real estate market in the year 2018. We would like to hear from you. What are your thoughts in this regard? What do you foresee to happen as we move along this year?
Like one of the audience said in the morning, it gets to a point, you make up your mind, you don't want to attend, you don't want to talk again. In the last 30 years, I've been teaching real estate since 1987. I've been teaching real estate, and I've been very active in real estate practice. Not from classroom point of view. I've been involved in projects at small level and at a very big level. So, I've experienced it all, and I get worried every day. A young man asked a question, expressed his fear, that when he looked around, he's afraid if he will ever own a house. And that's a genuine fear. You don't need to go to church to receive prophecy concerning that. Because my concern, I will, this is what I do every day. So I'm not telling you what you're hearing for the first time. But I want to humbly say, I said I started lecturing in 1987. That's about 21 years ago. By the special grace of God, with sense of humility, my dad attended St. Andrew's College, Oyo, and had grade 3 teacher training certificate. I schooled in this country and outside this country. I have a PhD. My dad had grade 3 teacher training. And my dad, when he was my age, as headmaster of a school, of a primary school, he retired as headmaster of a primary school with 3 houses and 1 in the village. And I, 50 years after, will be struggling to pay rent, with PhD, and somebody says something is not wrong with that system. Something is really wrong that we have to really define. But we've been able to look at problems and problems. Like I said, with sense of humility. My second son left uni in Europe about 5 years ago. A year after, he was able to buy a house in Ashford, Kent. My first son worked in Dublin, also in Europe, able to buy a house, and somebody finished the University of Lagos. 20 years after, is working, my staff, those that are my colleagues in the university, who have regular income, who have worked for 20 years, they don't have access or dream. Some of them sleep in offices because where the rented houses were at Ikotun, that they have to spend half of their salary to come. We have problem with us. But you know, I always discuss this not with frustration. I always discuss it so that we can be angry to do something. In working 2002, 2004, there was a narrative given that a Nigerian leader or an African leader went to America and he saw this high-speed train. Those are trains that moves at 500 kilometers per hour or more. We have them all over the world now. Very important, very nice. And he asked them, how much is this train? And they told him $5 million. I said, that's cheap. Well, let's allow. Pack up for me. And they put the train inside the crate. And they brought it to Nigeria. They set the train on Ajegule Road. Would that train move? I want to answer from you. Would that train move? What should we do first? Is it to buy train? What should we do first? We build the track. Listen. Like we have encouraged in the morning that the power for change is with us and within us. It takes this generation to really say, look, we need to build the tracks. We can't just import train. We need to build the track. And building the track is not a day exercise. It takes years to build the track. And that's what we are not doing. Each time we meet, we want solution. We want to buy the train. But we must start with building the track. And building the track in real estate is building the mortgage sector. No way, we can never get out of our problem until we build the mortgage sector. In Britain, it's 82%. In America, it's 65%. Developed nation, you see them 70% and above. When you come to Nigeria, it's less than 1% of our GDP. So you can look at the GDP of any nation and actually understand the pattern.
Just to finish up from what he said, in my own view, I'm not an economist, I'm in the real estate sector, but in my own view, the reason why our rates are so high is because of corruption. We keep going and taking money, borrowing money, and the money does not go to projects that make any sense. The money just goes into pockets. When the money goes into pockets, we go around and then we borrow money again, and the rates keep getting higher. And that's why the mortgage market cannot work, because our rates are too high. How can we be taking mortgages at 20-25%, where in 5 years you've already paid the price of the mortgage, and the mortgage is supposed to last for 25 years? So that's my own minor take. We need to address the issue of corruption in this nation for us to move forward. I'm not going to talk about that area. The area I'm going to talk on is where we see the market moving in 2018. We're still in January. Inflation is somewhere in the region of 15%. We're moving towards the elections of early 2019. And so where do we think the market is taking us? We've just left a recession. We've just left a recession on the oil sector. The non-oil sector, we're not so sure. The market is still very fragile. As oil prices rise, there's also a lot of pressure on putting up the pump price. If the pump price goes up, inflation will go up again, and interest rates will continue to remain high. So Nigeria is still in a precarious state. It's still a challenging market.
2016 and 2017 were both very difficult years for the corporate sector, which is what drives the commercial office market. The recession, which is led by the fall in the oil price and also the increase in and the devaluation of the naira as well, meant that corporate profits were down, corporate revenues were down. They were corporates were laying off workers, and the profits were down. They were not looking to expand or to invest in the market. But what we started to see in probably starting from the middle of last year was corporates were now looking to take new space. They started to look at their existing space, and decide whether that was fit for purpose, whether that is where they wanted to be in the next 5 and 10 years. And so we saw the level of inquiries rise quite significantly. The level of deals started to come back, and that's a trend that is that's a trend that we are seeing also in the first quarter of this year. Having said that, there is still a lot of supply. It's been well publicized previously, and also in this panel that, and also in your presentation, that there's been about 150,000 square meters of grade A office supply coming to the market in Victoria Island and Ikoyi, especially in the last, since 2014. So whilst we've had a lot of take up, it hasn't sort of cut into the supply levels and into sort of vacancy levels. So the supply levels are still too high to be in a position where we now start seeing rental growth in the market. So what we are projecting in the market is that the very best buildings, those the best specified buildings, buildings with best specification and best location, rental rates will still stay relatively stable this year. The buildings where the specification is not as good or the location is not as prime, that is where landlords and developers of those buildings will probably have to reduce their rental rates in order to start to attract tenants. Now, I'm just going to go briefly on to the second point which you made about there being more supply coming into the market. Yes, we are going to sort of see more completions this year, but the truth is that most of the buildings that are going to complete this year, whether it's Alliance Place or Ikoyi or most of them were, construction started, 3 or 4 years. Sorry, construction started 3 or 4 years ago, so the planning before that probably started another 2 or 3 years, before construction started. So those buildings were actually put into stream maybe in 2012 or around that time, where it was a very different market. Rents of $900, $1,000, $1,100 was achievable in that market.
What do you think, can be done, especially looking at the slums we have around, looking at the opportunities we have around? What do you think can be done, to achieve more inclusion, and then reduce this deficit ultimately?
Yeah, thank you very much. Like I said earlier, in every problem is a business opportunity. So, a nation that has so much problem also has so many business opportunities. And many people that really don't see slum, there are many people now that discover this saturated markets at this high end. I mean, when you have the bridge, when you have this Aja bridge, just look at your right and you see thousands of vacant houses. We have them up to VGC. So then we begin to look at what do we, and this is our business. There are so many things that science really threw up that we are trying to really look for explanation for. And that says that as developers, many of us raise our hands as developers, that we have to put so much money or resources in research. Because one of those things that we found out recently that really gave us concern is within a given area, you see various percentage of void. Like in Admiralty Way, we have 70% void. When you move to a Rock Drive, you see 80% void. In Olawale Cole, is 50% vacancy. But if we just analyze Admiralty Way, where they have 70% void, we might be tempted to say the market is good in there. But you have to really probe into every location. The same thing we found out in VI. Quite we have Adetokunbo, Ademola, 100% occupancy. In Musa Yadua, 3% void. But in Karimi Cotton Road, we discover 40% void. So, for every investment decision we're making, either in Surulere or in Lekki, we have to probe every location. We can't just generalize that the market is doing well. Property that were built along this road, they've taken it up within 2 weeks. We have to probe every location. The same thing we also found out in the mall area. Quiet Silverbird has 100% occupancy. Malls around it have almost 70% void. So we have to really interrogate our decision, our investment decision, before we jump into them. I know some of the developers you interact with, they have this rent to buy option. It's not that difficult. It's a matter of agreement. It's a matter of agreement. It's whatever you subscribe to. but it's something that the Lagos State government, there are some PPP under Lagos State government that have that window opportunity for rent to buy, so that you can go through the property ladder and it becomes yours. So if you ask question, you definitely see. I think foreign countries should be able to help you because you've attended this program. So they should be able to help you. But I know it's a product that is already in the market. And I believe that within this year or next year, USAID, Akin, is one of those products that they are considering. Because he told us in the morning that before, in their retailing properties, that they take 1 year, but now they started taking quarterly rent. So rent to buy is also a way of buying properties where you start as a renter and you co-share. That's a share ownership. You enter through a share ownership, then you scale up. So it's possible, it's doable, the products are there. Thank you.
Can we give a generous round of applause to these panelists?